set aside prayer and with a commitment to have as open of a mind as you can and as open of a heart as you can gather, and we'll have the gift of receiving it beyond our wildest dreams. The set aside prayer is that prayer that we can all customize and really see improvement and changes in our lives. And it's been said in as short as 30 days, you can see differences. So, God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my will, and you as my source of power for a new experience with myself, my step two, and especially with you. So, hooray, we're entering step two. It's probably seemed like it's been a really long, slow road just to get to step two, but we have arrived. And chapter four is the We Agnostics, and it's geared to follow step one. As Bill did that throughout the book, he made things really flow nicely. And it starts on page 44, and Bill says, in the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, which is the problem of the mind, or if when using you have little control over the amount you take, which is the problem of the body, you are probably an addict. If you have either of those, which most people find they have both. But Bill did give people the option of having the either or, but it seems to be a totality issue, really, of having both those symptoms. So it is important to know whether you have a death wish or not, which is the death by addiction, as it's a slow and tortured death that will destroy you mentally and your mind, your obsessions, and it even comes with a little physical reaction, which makes complete abstinence nearly impossible, requiring a spiritual experience to overcome your self-fulfilling prophecy. When we look at our own history with as much honesty as we can gather, we will, in fact, if we are an addict, suffer from both the body and the mind simultaneously. So we ask ourselves these two questions. Number one, can I quit entirely? If you want to quit but find you cannot, you're likely an addict. Do you have any control? If you use, can you control the amount you use or consume? If not, you're probably an addict. Some people might just have unhealthy habits, and that is a worthwhile thing to discover, because who would do this work and have to go to meetings and attend 12-step workshops if they didn't have an addiction? Well, you'd be surprised. Some people love the fellowship because of the casual group therapy and the social components that it can bring with the live meetings and with the online meetings too. And those people, although they are very few, don't have to do this work in order to have a happy life. They just have to manage their unhealthy habits. So this chapter is about a spiritual experience, and I find it really interesting that it starts out with the words, we agnostics. Bill is pretty much getting up close and personal right out of the gate and in your face. He wants to know what your deal is right away. He starts off with the problem of the God word. And apparently back in the 1930s, it was also an issue there. And there was a lot of negative connotation about organized religion even back then. I think even statistically currently it is even more negative because of all the unfortunate experiences that many people have had with their family of origin and or with their inherited religious traditions. There are so many people who have had horrific childhood events. It is totally understandable that they have given up on God. They couldn't depend on loved ones in the room with them. How could they trust a concept? I found in my own personal life that the concept of organized religion proved to be too restrictive and outdated for my soul to thrive with. I grew spiritually and intuitively, and my old ways were not able to fit my new insights. I was raised Catholic, and I appreciate their rituals and histories, but it can't fit my new broadened sense of awareness that I have with my higher power. And I felt like religion separated us, people in general. So I wasn't interested in that either. So for me, religion was too limiting and prejudiced for me to be part of any specific one, with perhaps the exception of Buddhism, which isn't even actually a religion, but a mindset. It's about consciousness. When I feel that pull towards the traditions of religion, because some of them are just beautiful, especially around the holidays. Yes, I'm one of those people who gets a warm, fuzzy feeling full of people in a church singing around Christmas time. It just really fills my heart with the joy. And that's, that's a great feeling to enter a large church like that and just feel like you fit right in and everything's wonderful. What I came to realize in my vast search for meaning is that God has not let me down. My poor choices have. And before that, as a child, my parents' poor choices affected me and let me down, not God. I had seen it the other way around, that God had let me down by giving me the parents he did, so to speak. But free will allows us to choose to pursue or reject organized religion in whatever way we want, with the potential to accept or resist God's grace. Thus, we create an independent, personal, spiritual path with a broader view of God. A relationship built on personal choice in love is more meaningful to me. If humans had no free will, their actions would be predetermined and there could be no true love or relationship with God, only obedience to a divine command on some level. So, religion has three major functions in society. It provides social cohesion to help maintain social solidarity through shared rituals, beliefs, social control to enforce religious based morals and norms to help maintain conformity, and it offers meaning and purpose to answer any existential questions, hopefully. My dog doesn't bother you guys. Einstein did not believe in a personal intervening God, but rather expressed a cosmic religion based on awe for the harmony and laws of the universe, often referring to it as Spinoza's God. Einstein described organized religion in the Bible as primitive superstitions, but also criticized outspoken atheists for their similar intolerance to religious fanatics. Ultimately, he viewed science and a deep, albeit not observant, sense of religious wonder as complementary. For Spinoza, God is not a being who rules the world, but the very fabric of the universe. To know God is to understand the fundamental laws and interconnectedness of nature, which leads to a joyous and free life. Bill says, to one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible, but to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. Atheism is a lack of belief in any gods, while agnosticism is a claim about the unknowability of God's existence. So they're related, but they're not twins. An atheist believes there are no gods whatsoever, or simply doesn't believe in anything, while the agnostic believes it's impossible to know for certain, for sure, if God or God exists. So they leave their options open. These concepts are not mutually exclusive. One can be an agnostic atheist, meaning they lack belief in God and believe the question of their existence is unknowable. So, we spent the last few months studying the effects of the body and the experience of the mind. which we came up with powerlessness, which is no choice, no decision, no choice whatsoever. Addiction can be described as a death sentence. It's irrevocable, irretrievable, irredeemable, and hopeless. We also looked at unmanageability in the same context in step one dash, that our lives had become unmanageable. In my will on its own, natural human willpower doesn't have the power to manage my life or reality successfully. These are the true experiences that we had when we looked with an open mind and heart. Agnostic or atheist. If you find yourself in either of these scenarios, or find you have resistance to the word God, please don't be discouraged. Bill says, it isn't so difficult. About half of our original fellowship were of exactly that type. Bill's referring to them being agnostic or atheists. Praying the set aside for a daily and as needed is part of our commitment to a new set aside attitude. What that means is we realize we need to release our death grip on our prejudice. And if we can, or maybe you can't, you can at least be willing to have your death grip released. Bill says at first some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. So to review a little bit, we've talked about the issues with the body and the mind of an addict. And we have also seen that we have a bigger problem than the spiritual malady. It's seen as an internal problem that fuels addictive behaviors, causing unhappiness, emotional turmoil, and a persistent feeling of distraction or emptiness that external addictive substances or behaviors cannot permanently fill. Although they might have for a time, but that way will never return again. We've come too far. The problem with the will, some people call it the spirit, I prefer to call it the will. It doesn't really matter as long as you understand the function in yourself that allows you to make your choice. This is the key to steps 2 and 3, the willpower, the power of no choice. You guys are probably sick of hearing that. But it is the conundrum of step 1, not with regard to addiction. We have already seen that as a body mind problem, but in regards to unmanageability. Step 1 introduced us to the unmanageability of the human race. When I first learned of unmanageability, it really hit home. My whole life was experiencing it, not just my addiction issues. It was everywhere. And we know now that unmanageability is a human problem. It is not an addicts only issue. 10 out of 10 humans, that's 100%, are experiencing unmanageability. Bill says extreme examples, meaning that the rest of the human race that isn't experiencing addictions, just the unmanageability issue is present. Bill says, where us addicts are the extreme examples of self-will run riot, meaning we take it to an all-time level or extreme instance in all of our affairs. So again, this is a model. It's critical to step 1, but also going forward, it is also going to be critical to step 2. This will break the code of step 2 for us and give a lot of depth and energy to step 3. So it's not a body issue, but the mind issue. And our will issue, the two things that make us specifically human. We have a body, but so does a horse. What makes us different from animals is that we have an ability to know reflexively, and we have the ability to make completely independent decisions. When talking about unmanageability and the inability of our predisposition of no choice with regards to our willpower. So, who am I as a human being? These are serious questions. Take some time or notes if you think that might help, and think about it between maybe tonight and next week, and ask yourself, who am I as a human being? Being human encompasses a rich tapestry of qualities that shape our thoughts, emotions, and actions. Five of the most important qualities of being human are consciousness, empathy, creativity, resilience, and the pursuit of meaning and purpose. I am a finite material being. We all are, all of us tonight. Well, everybody. A finite person is a human being with measurable limits, most notably a limited lifespan and impermanent existence. The term finite highlights that a person has boundaries and cannot exist indefinitely, in contrast to an infinite or boundless being, such as a higher power. This concept applies to the human condition, as all individuals are subject to death. Their lives are not endless. So I have a body and I have emotions within that body. And I have a body for biological survival, enabling functions like movement, sensing the environment, interacting with the world, and reproduction. And I have a mind that processes information that it receives from my senses in my body. We think and experience emotions with our brain, and it is the root of human intelligence. And I have a will. Humans have a strong sense of freedom, agency, and self determination, which leads to a natural belief in free will and a sense of self. This is a pretty simple concept, and it will help with steps 2 and 3. So, is God necessary? Whether God is necessary depends on one's philosophical stance, with arguments for necessity often linking God to the origin and existence of the universe, or as a being whose existence is entailed by the very definition of the greatest conceivable being. Conversely, some philosophical and religious traditions, like Buddhism, view a concept of a supreme deity as unnecessary for personal liberation or understanding the nature of reality. Ultimately, the necessity of God is a matter of ongoing debate and belief rather than a universally accepted fact. So you decide, is God necessary? Step 2 came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Bill doesn't say God in step 2 because he attempted to eliminate the religious words in connotation because he wanted it to be neutral. He wanted it to appeal to everyone from any belief that they came with. Step 2 is about a power that is greater than ourselves. And Bill says power greater than myself can refer to any entity, force, or concept that is larger and more influential than one's own personal will or ego. To describe a higher power that can provide strength, hope, and guidance in overcoming personal struggles like addiction. This power is intentionally kept vague in the Big Book to allow for personal interpretation, encompassing religious figures, nature, the universe, community, love, or even the process of recovery itself. So I think it's great that Bill did that with the Big Book, making it open to everybody. He didn't want any religious preconceived notions to stop people from recovering. So this is power with a capital P. It's very special. Bill uses capital letters throughout the big book to add emphasis to a lot of words. So if you're reading the book and you see capitals in a place where you wouldn't expect them, that's Bill trying to let you know, pay attention, this is important. There's a lot of talk in 12-step meetings regarding sanity, and the reason is people don't really understand the big book and the vocabulary used by Bill, especially the use of the word sanity. Bill uses the word sanity to describe an obsession of an unhealthy mind. He says on page 37, whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. Bill says, how can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else? Bill is referring to the foolish idea that Jim thought he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. But keep in mind that Bill is not saying this is a clinical diagnosis of insanity. He's trying to convey that we have a vulnerability to an obsession, that our thoughts hijack us. I mean, that's really kind of wow when you think about that we're being hijacked. And here we are feeling guilt and all these emotions because we think we're creating it, or other people even think we create it. People still think it's a moral issue. So it's really important that we're being hijacked because we don't have a choice. So step 2 is a call for a decision. The big book isn't really clear on this statement, but in step 3, it's pretty clear. It's right there in the step when Bill says, made the decision to turn, not so much in step 2, but let's keep going. Step 2 is a decision, but it's about power. Step 3 is a decision about a relationship with power. There is an obvious difference. So step 2 is the invitation for you to have this concept. And what is your concept? Have you asked yourself what you believe about God? Not what you think you should believe based on outside influences, not your religion, not what your parents told you, maybe your spouse or your neighbors, but what is your belief about God? Your very own, very personal, deep down belief. Bill writes, if a mere code of morals, meaning a blueprint for what guides our ethical behaviors, or he says a better philosophy of life, which is a statement about knowledge, meaning if I knew better, I'd do better. And he connects it to our philosophies. We're sufficient to overcome addiction. We would have recovered long ago. No, our philosophies are not going to recover us, ever. Well, good Lord, every one of us has bookshelves full of self-help books. This is my personal library. Modes of behavior, adjustment that promise freedom and enlightenment, that awakening in spiritual experience will transcend. On page 45, Bill says, but we have found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. I literally have an office full of amazingly informative self-help books. When I was 45, I went to college to get my answers by getting a psychology degree. And I even graduated alongside my oldest daughter. Aside from the search for answers, it was a shining moment, but a lot of work, and I still didn't have the answers. I've also worked with Claudia Black, Wayne Dyer, Dr. David Hawkins, Carol Howe, many others. I joined more than a dozen religious organizations and eventually settled with becoming a spiritualist. Well, with a reach beyond the grave, I figured that would go into great lengths to find the missing piece in my soul. And I did get a lot of answers and insight and pathways with all these resources. But the piece that filled the hole in my soul was my spiritual awakening, which of course came after time spent deep diving the work of the 12 step big book work with a bit of painful experiences sprinkled on top. But it did eventually get me there. And I wouldn't trade all the books I read because I did learn a lot and I like to learn different things. On page 45, Bill says, "We could will these things with all our might." Bill's making a transition about unmanageability from the body and the mind to our willpower. He says, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed completely. Lack of power, that is our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live. Bill's not saying by which we can deal with our addiction effectively, but he is referring to our unmanageability being dealt with effectively and on a daily basis. And he says, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. But where and how do we find this power? Wouldn't we all tap into it? Well, Bill will be meandering in the next 10 pages in his discussion and commentary, preparing us for the answer, and he'll eventually answer it on page 55. But don't jump ahead yet, which we will be looking at deeply next week as part of the assignment going forward, not tonight. But do realize he is setting us up as to where and how we are going to find this power. He's going to guide us right to it. He answers on page 45, well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main objective is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problems. Which, as we know, is lack of power, not my addiction. It is not about power over people, places, or things, because lack of power is our dilemma. That's Bill, I'm quoting him. That means that Bill wrote a book which will be spiritual as well as moral. Spiritual meaning we are talking about the world of spirit, the invisible world, the immaterial world, in contrast to moral, which means value. This is not a contrast of moral to immoral. There's nothing moral about this. So let's talk about God. Bill really nails it on page 58 when he says, we have to let go of our old ideas. The quote is, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. This is directed to those of you who think that you have an effective relationship with the God of your choice. A relationship that you hold that is satisfactory enough, but you perhaps haven't been taken to a place you didn't realize could even exist. Just be open and be willing and open-minded to new information, because that will lead you to the new experience. It is also suggested to reread chapter 4 with the intention of disputing the information you don't resonate with. So you could go back to chapter 4 if you've already read it, and you could do a red marker or pen and a green marker or pen. Red meaning, nope, no way, I don't like that concept. Or green meaning, yeah, thumbs up, this works for me. So when you're reading it and you've got your markers, your pens, or whatever, ask yourself, what am I resisting? What part of that made sense? Did it even make sense? Maybe it doesn't make sense. What can you keep and what needs to be thrown out? Make a note of it. If something comes up and it reminds you of what's going on already within your own spirituality, circle it or add your red or green. Is that a good thing or is that a negative thing that you want to eliminate? Bill says, we looked askance at many individuals who claim to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? So, you've probably in your travels heard about getting a God upgrade, but I really want to emphasize to everyone that this is not about throwing away what you already have, of course, unless you want to or feel the need to eliminate it for whatever reason. This is about the vastness of the possibilities of what your relationship with your creator could expand into. What I am really suggesting emphatically is to be willing to have your current beliefs be reassessed and upgraded. The set aside prayer would be great assistance if you know you want to attempt it but still not sure where to begin. Add it to your daily prayer. Ask for the guidance to bring your higher powers light into your life by turning up the dimmer switch, showing you the way. How long has it been since you thought about your highest belief? Have you ever done an assessment or a reassessment? Invite your higher power to come into your heart and mind. Open your heart, open your mind so that you can have new information, therefore, a new experience. On page 46, Bill says, "We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak and cowardly. Many of us have had a less than perfect relationship with God. Some of us have even abandoned our beliefs in religion. As a society, religion and belief in a higher being statistically is lower than it has ever been. The human brain has evolved, and as it has, the spiritual part has been left behind for many who have chosen not to see it with endless possibilities and growth." Bill writes, "Faced with addiction, destruction, we soon become as open minded on spiritual matters as we had to be on other questions," which is the truth. When on our knees and we don't know where else to go, we tend to finally look up and see that we have a higher power. Perhaps we are able to meander along in life with the support of God that fit with the needs of that time until it didn't. And life became bigger, and we became bigger, and our problems became bigger. Well, so too must our God or higher power expand. This is a version of the famous Hand of God painting in the Sistine Chapel in Rome. It was painted way up at the top of the dome by Michelangelo, who was laying on his back. And the hand on the right is technically the hand of God, and the hand on the left is mankind. And the reason I really liked this this picture is I don't believe there's a hand of God as this portrays, but I do believe we are co-creators. So we take what we choose and create through the power of our connection to our source, which is the creator, our higher power. So we choose the medium, the colors, the theme, and we let our creative finish it with the end result of our higher power's choosing. I can technically only paint the background. My creator is the hand that finishes for me that which I cannot do by myself. Jesus actually taught this, that his followers would be capable of doing exactly the same and anything that he was able to do. He even said that we would go on and do greater works than he could do. He said that all things are possible for those who believe. Judaism views humans as co-creators with God, responsible for developing and improving the world God created through their actions and creativity. Many religions teach that humans are co-creators with God, meaning we are given the freedom and capacity to partner with the Creator in the ongoing creation and betterment of the world through our actions, creative endeavors, and care for creation. So I'd like to say this is the picture of the two hands are going to merge and hold hands and work together. Michelangelo just got tired and didn't finish. So I do the groundwork. I buy the seeds. I plant the seeds indoors. I go outside when the weather gets better and I till the ground and I transfer them outside. I water them and I feed them. And my work's pretty much done. I cannot create flowers, but I can do everything up to, including planting the seeds. Bill says, we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. Bill's point is that any God that I think I can define or comprehend is inadequate because my mind is not vast enough or evolved enough, and therefore what I am thinking about my Creator is insufficient because the Creator is infinite and I am not. The language to describe my Creator is not available because my mind cannot comprehend its immensity, which confirms what Bill says, quote, we commenced to get results even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power which is God. It's totally acceptable that we don't comprehend the concept, and we are deluding ourselves if we think that we are capable of having an adequate concept of God. It might be adequate and effective for you, and this is wonderful, which is going to be the whole point of the exercise in step 2. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with our source. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things. So Bill is saying, wherever you are, start right there. Make the connection. Even if you don't feel like it's the God of your hopeful choice at some point, stay with it. Stay with whatever connection you've already got, because we're going to make that connection broader. We're going to make it bigger. So Bill speaks of power and direction of my mind and guidance so that I can receive better power for my will so that I am able to do what I know is best. And he ends it with, provided we take other simple steps. Provided we take other simple steps. What might Bill be saying here? Is he talking about his previous comment, willing to go to any lengths if you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it? Then you are ready to take certain steps. This is in reference to step 3. Bill is preparing us that we are going to commit. This isn't a call to action. It is the commitment to steps 4 through 9. So we're not doing anything about it. We're just making the actual commitment. Bill says we begin to be possessed by a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make two-hearted with those who seek him. To us, the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. The realm of the spirit is very broad with lots of wiggle room, and it is all-inclusive. But Bill is giving us lots of room here. This is the magic, the silver bullet of the 12-step process, and especially of step 2, never exclusive, never forbidding to those who honestly seek it. So the magic is in the seeking. It doesn't mean you have to arrive or you have to do anything else. You just have to be willing and open to the concept of seeking it out. He says, when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own God, your own conception of God. He's very clear here. He wants us to come up as we are, come with what we have. We can always make adjustments, but come with what you've got and show up now. At the start, he says, this was all we needed to commence our spiritual growth, to effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. So again, Bill is saying that whatever your current beliefs are, it is good enough. Whether that is doubt or something else, it's you've got something going there. We're gonna work with that. He says we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. We use our own conception no matter how limited it might be. If we were given our religion, it's time we look and see what we want and what we may not want and get rid of it and throw it out. It's time to grow into our new religion. As we grow spiritually, so too does our religion, or it should. So now picture Bill W. sitting in front of you, and he says, you need to ask yourself this one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? Well, it's kind of quick to ask that question, I think. We all need time to settle and be reconciled in our thoughts and our hearts about our own religion. And I think Bill knew that, and he handles that because he knows going into this that 50% of us are non believers. He told us this earlier. And we have resistance. We have been resisting for a lifetime. So Bill is prepared. He says, it's okay if you don't believe. You are at least willing, right? We are aware of the hole in our souls and how it is affecting our lives. And it has been an inadequate struggle with our addictions and our failures in our lives. Even with all the self-help and therapies and all the many things that I have done with the 12-step approach, I am still at loose ends with it all. If you don't believe, are you willing to believe? If you had a first step experience to any degree, you may be realizing that there is something lacking in your life. Something not enough in your approach to your addiction and your power to do anything about it. I don't believe and don't see the need or the connection this has on my addiction, but I will let a little light shine in through a crack of doubt that maybe there is a higher power that is greater than me, a creator that created me and therefore can also create peace and abstinence. Bill says, as soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. I am willing to be willing to be willing. Bill says it's been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. A spiritual arch which we can walk to a new freedom, and he says this with willingness, is the cornerstone. And the foundation was already laid in Bill's mind in step one, the deep excavation of powerlessness and the experience that we have had with that. And now we lay our cornerstone. This will set the direction of the entire arch and the keystone at the top, which holds this all together. Later, we walk through the arch to a new freedom. Very exciting and great news for all of us. Just not tonight. So Bill says, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith, which seemed difficult to believe. Besides seeming unable to accept much on faith, we don't want to relinquish any semblance of control, and that handicaps us through abstinence and prejudice, which is why we pray the set-aside prayer. We need to be released. Many of us, myself included, have been touchy and bristly with antagonism and defensiveness towards this type of thinking. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Notice how satisfied Bill's words are. So these are the spiritual principles, and I just put them up there for visual, but you can see them, in various books and stuff. But the honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, love, discipline, patience, awareness, and service. And they do coincide with each of the steps. But that's another workshop. So Bill says, faced with addictive destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, our addiction was a great persuader. Addiction finally beats us into a state of reasonableness. And that is true. It takes a lot to hit us over the head with what needs to be done. And for a lot of us, it can be death or something that signifies death or someone else's death even, but it hits hard. And when we look at the reality of our lives and the bedevilments and unmanageability that beats us into a state of depression, of needing God, we know we can't do it on our own. We have tried repeatedly and failed. We're exhausted and on the brink of complete failure and letting go further into our disease. We're restless, irritable, and discontented. So Bill is going to give us a bunch of reasons and facts and talk about science and electricity in molecules on page 48. Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the alpha and the omega, the beginning and end of all. Rather vain of us, isn't it? Therefore, Bill concludes, we who have traveled this dubious path, we beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. Bill is in support of organized religions for the mere fact that it has given purpose and direction to millions. We might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves. That's kind of an ouch. That one hits hard. That's Bill sending us an if only we had this to begin with. So Bill says on page 50, we never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. And he goes on to say, on one proposition, however, these men and women agreed every one of them has gained access and believes in a power greater than himself. Came to believe is a confirmation of the dimmer switch way of discovery and recovery. He's talking about their attitude toward power. And doing certain simple small things brings about a revolutionary change in the way we think, feel, and behave. Done to us, not by us, but not without us. I said it wrong. Done to us, by him, you guys know what I mean. Remember back in step 1, in the face of total failure of our human resources, unmanageability, they found that a new power, peace, and happiness and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. And Bill says requirements, not suggestions. If you want a spiritual awakening, these are the requirements that you have, that you take. These actions, once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they are making heavy going of life and leaving aside the drink question. Because we know addiction is not the problem, and they tell us why living was so unsatisfactory, that being unmanageable, they show how the change came over them when hundreds of people, now hundreds of thousands, millions actually, are able to say the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, completely confirming what he said in Appendix 2. The presence of God is the essence of a spiritual experience. Awareness is the conscious contact. So, step 2 is a confirmation that we are in constant contact. It is also an invitation to become conscious of that contact. Step 3 is an invitation to turn that conscious contact into a relationship, and steps 4 through 9 are the steps that remove the obstacles to the relationship. Step 10 continues removing those obstacles. And step 11 is sitting in meditation to improve our conscious contact, and that is how it all works. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. We are all chained, aka fettered, by our predispositions and our prejudices from the lack of knowledge and experience that we are attached to. And that prevents us from seeing the truth. Bill says it this way: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as we were about ancients in the realm of the material? Bill's talking about such things as believing the world is flat or that airplanes won't be able to fly, and of course none of that's true now, as we have figured out. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve all our problems. When others showed us that God, sufficiency, worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the Wright brothers would never fly. It is not by chance we are given the power to reason, to examine evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That's the function of the mind. This is one of man's magnificent attributes. Why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw our hands up in doubt and said, we don't know. Now we will see possibly the most important point in the big book. And really clear your ears out for this. Bill says, when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade step 1. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or God is nothing. This is a mystery that we are looking at. This is infinite force that has no beginning and no end. Bill says either he is or he isn't, and then says, what's your choice? We are not making a decision about God being real or not. We are confronted with a question of faith. We aren't able to prove if God is real or not. We have to think about our faith. When I read this, I didn't like it so much. It felt so black and white, and hadn't I been made aware of my need to be more gray in areas of my life through various disciplines. It took me some time to reconcile this idea, but with lots of time and consideration, it came to make total sense. For me to believe in a God or a higher power, or for me specifically, a creator, I had to and frankly realize that to believe that it wasn't everything was a huge injustice to myself. I was shortchanging myself, my life, my spirituality, and so much more. And once I made the 100% everything switch, my behaviors shifted, my life improved, and my fears all but disappeared. Believing in something inferior as my God got me into a lot of trouble. So step 2 is the decision. We arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. So when I read this, I had to ask myself, what works? What words would I use to describe my faith? What did faith feel like for me? Was it enough? Or did my faith always seem to fall short of my needs? Where did I come from? What was there before my birth? What is the force in the universe that was able to create me? What did Bill say about it? On page 47, he said, one word, willingness. This is the cornerstone. We arrived at this point. We were squarely confronted with the question of faith. So we are confronting this now. And I ask that you also confront it to yourself. What is your faith? What does it mean? Bill said willingness, and that's the cornerstone. But come up with your own answers. See what you find. Maybe it's time to do a little upgrade of your faith. But you got to know what your faith is before you can realize you need to do something to it. And so, what about faith? It's a process. Is faith a function of the body? Is it an emotion? If I feel good, is God present? Is faith a feeling? Is faith a function of my mind? If I know and think and describe God, will I have some certainty about it? Does that mean faith can be a fact? Is faith a function of the will? I can shape it and force it to my own choice. Is faith manipulable? Manipulatable, if that's a word? Well, as we have seen, it is not a function of the mind. Faith, by definition, is the acceptance for that which is where there is no evidence. There is no certainty with faith, and it is not about knowledge. Faith is diametrically opposed to science of the mind. It is a feeling in the body if we feel God's presence. If I don't feel God's presence, then God's not there, and that doesn't make sense either. If you are logical like me, it is not about feelings or emotions that emerge from my body. So, what the heck is faith? Bill gave us a little hint on page 47. He asked if we were willing to believe. It wasn't as clear there, and now again on page 53, he said very matter of factly, God is or God isn't. What is your choice? Well, wow, that means faith is a decision. It is merely my choice. God is, and then my mind says, well, it is a good idea. Because if it isn't real, I am screwed beyond belief based on my first step experience. Therefore, my mind accepts that decision, and that is my belief. The acceptance of the decision regarding faith, and then the body puts it into action, and my behaviors and actions based off my belief in faith is my trust. Faith is merely empty, invisible, without substance. There really is no reality to faith. It is merely this empty decision I am making that God is, and then I base my life on it. It is a gambler's decision, really. I am making a decision with all my hope that it is real, because I am in the chains of bondage of addiction, in my unmanageable self, and I want freedom now. As we see, I am still not free. I am still in my self-imposed cage, trained against freedom. But steps 4 through 7 will be the key to release me. For now, I just need to decide if God is necessary. It's up to you. It is your decision to ponder and make. This is step 2, came to believe a process of a decision about my concept of God or my higher power that He is. You must ask what your concept is, what you want, and need for qualities. and then we can go from there. So this is the end of the PowerPoint. There are 5 more slides after this one that you can watch later. I'm going to stop because of the time factor. They're just more about the concept of the mind being hijacked. So it's just 5 more. If you want to watch it when the video comes out, you can. But I'm going to stop here so that we can have some people raise hands or ask questions. If anyone has anything going on about homework they need to address.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Susan.
The slide with the man thinking about the apple and then it materializing and then it falling on his head and then he's eating it. What was that about?
That particular, I'm gonna have to go into it to see it.
I like it, but I wasn't 100% sure,
I hear you.
what's going on.
Yeah, it's like, why did she pick that picture to go with that? So that particular slide is showing you about, okay, so the person in the picture is thinking about an apple, and he's picturing the apple on the branch, and then he's thinking, okay, so the apple's going to fall off, it's going to land in my hand, and I'm going to eat it. So it's kind of an invitation to say, all right, what are you thinking about, and what can you create within your own mind that can come up with an end result? Like this guy goes from the thought of an apple to actually biting into this great big red juicy apple.
Yeah.
So it's a process that you can take also yourself, which will lead you to, ironically, the fruit of the tree, which I think wasn't Adam and Eve was an apple, but that's not.
Would you pull it up again? Because I realized I forgot to take a screenshot.
Let me grab it. Hold on.
If you can.
Yep. All right. Can you see?
There we go.
Yeah.
It's like he didn't know what he was thinking. Then he thought of the apple, and then it actually materialized to the point it fell on him, and then he grabbed it, and then he got to eat it.
Yeah. So it's basically like a cartoon to show you how intention works, which
Mm,
the power of intention, which basically means I'm giving my permission for the information to come in.
mm,
Thinking about, I'm thinking about what my higher power is, and I'm giving it enough thought that there's an actual energy about it. And I'm starting to feel like there's a connection. And now I'm actually starting to feel like there is a presence, perhaps, in my energy field or whatever you want to call it. So the cartoon basically is about, consenting to having God be your everything. Because of the free will, until we make the conscious decision that God is everything, it defaults to God is nothing.
yeah.
So we have to make a purposeful mindset that God is everything. And if it hits you over the head, that's great. It's a it's a fantastic confirmation, but that's the beginning of what we want to do. We want to start putting it out there, on how we want to expand our definition of what God has been in our life. And has it been enough? Or has it fallen short? Or has it been deep in so many rules and regulations that you can't even feel like you're connecting with something beyond a written rule book? It's there's so much that we pick up along the way and we don't even realize we've picked it up. That Bill is saying, I just want you to make sure and really take a look at your higher power. And if it's not what you need it to be, then you haven't realized the immensity of what God is. And that is actually the lesson, is to come to the realization of the immensity of God,
Mm.
which religion doesn't always necessarily do. A lot of religions fall short. And some of the reason religion falls short is because they're too busy competing with other religions. Whereas, we could all just have our own personal view of God and imagine if we all did believe God was everything, what a different world this would be. There'd be no wars. There would be no killing people. It makes so much more sense than what we're doing. This definition of religion that it just tears people apart. It literally murders people, and it has from the beginning of time. So we want to relook at that because religion is a man-made entity. God is not. God did not make religion, but man did. So we want to look at our concepts and we want to look at our ideals and see where we feel we land with that. Is it a religious belief I've had since I was having my first communion? Some people have their first communion and that's their God for the rest of their life. It's like thinking, where's Santa Claus? I believed in Santa Claus at 12. Why does that concept change? But yet our concept to the most important thing in our life, which is a higher power, not change. We have to think about that. We change, we grow, the human brain expands, but people's minds about God hasn't. People are more willing to leave their religion behind than they are to upgrade what's going on with their own religion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Rochelle.
Hey, I this was really powerful tonight, and I've been doing program for a million years. But one thing that came to me was I was in a store and I was looking at greeting cards for no particularly good reason, and I saw this one and I wow and bought it, and I've carried it with me. And at the front is a little girl, and she's clearly fallen off a bicycle. Looks like she was learning to ride, and the inside said, "Never put a period where God has placed a comma." And I thought that really applied to what you said tonight about defining a more expansive God, that not letting my mind, I'll let God do up to this point, but no farther. But at the same time, like where you had the hands going together, um, I was thinking about back when I went through cancer treatment, and I could have just said, I'll leave this all up to God, you know. And the truth was that I needed to also have faith in my doctors and in my willingness to go through what I had to go through. So I think that for me is a really key thing, that God doesn't say, like you said at the beginning, you'll get the results, you don't have to do anything. It's not like that. I have to be willing, and some days I'm not willing to get up and out of bed and do anything. But that's not God's intention for me. And so tonight for me was really, really powerful. So thank you.
I'm glad. Thank you, Rochelle. Hi, Cesar.
Hi, Lisa. So on page 56, that one sentence has just jumped out at me. It says, "Who are you to say there is no God?" I mean, I've always believed in my higher power. My religion hasn't been, forced on me. So I've always believed in God. But this step work, especially working with you, when you've told me to upgrade my relationship with my higher power, my conscious contact, and reading that one sentence just jumped up at me, and I say, that's right. Who am I to say there is no God? And you told me that it's the unmanageability of our being. Um, and then also just looking at nature and looking at a newborn baby, you know, from the little nails to the just the whole intricate of the human body. It just, I have no question. It's like God is everything for me.
And that's a great point, because once you start, that's a great place to start too with a newborn. It's perfect creation. And then you start personalizing it and you see everything in your presence, and it becomes everything that you see is God, or there's been a touch of God in it.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's that's page that you read, who are you to say there is no God? Okay, well, say it all you want, but that doesn't mean it make it true, you know? There's a creator. Something created everything that we can see, touch, feel, smell, hear, everything. And if it's vast enough to create this universe, and the 8 billion people on the planet that no two are alike, that's the God for me.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm,
And
I'm
then
totally on board.
in the beginning, you were telling, you said, you know, who am I? And there were 5 points. I got the consciousness, creativity, empathy. And what are the other two?
That was,
It was in the beginning of your
and so who am I was
session.
the 5 most important qualities of being human are
Yeah.
consciousness, empathy, creativity, resilience,
Mm.
and the pursuit of meaning or purpose.
Thank you.
And that is who we all are as humans. But I think that we don't generally live from all those 5 places. We tend to shut it down and not really put all of that into our lives. We don't wonder about our consciousness or our empathy, or even how about our creativity?
Yeah.
When we're creating, we're hand in hand with the creator of everything.
That's right.
Whether it's creating a loaf of bread or creating a situation where it's going to work out for somebody. That's the point. We can't do this alone, but we can co-create. And when we do co-create, we can make a huge difference, because now we're tapping into the power of the creator of the universe. I mean, that's like blow your mind kind of stuff.
Yep. Thank you.
And it's there. It's there for everybody to tap into. Everybody can tap into that creativeness. Everybody does. If you get up in the morning and you put on a certain outfit, you're using your creativity. So there's God in that little moment of, I'm going to get dressed today. God's right there creating with you. I'm going to put on this outfit.
Yeah.
So it's so vast. It's so immense. There isn't even words that can express the power that is present in all of our lives. And it's there waiting for us to say, I give consent. I want this to be part of my life. This is where I want to go. I want to be abstinent. I want to be free. I want to live in peace. And we do that
Thank you.
with the creator. So create a great day tomorrow, Cesar.
Mhm.
Hi, Lolly.
Lisa, could you repeat those words again? I want to write them down too.
The 5.
Yeah.
Yep. So
What are they? The 5 what?
they're the 5 most important qualities of a human being.
Okay.
So it's the first one is consciousness. Second one is empathy. Third is creativity. The fourth one is resilience.
Mhm.
And the last is the pursuit of meaning or purpose.
Nice. Thank you.
You know, it's interesting because I've always believed in God. I've never had a moment I didn't believe in God. But I don't feel the access of that power. Now, I find people with a religion tend to have that power, to be honest. I'm not, what I've seen. But I always find that baffling to believe in God completely, but like, oh God, let me not eat or something. And I've had a problem with my food, my food program, food addiction, and or with anxiety or just a couple different sub areas of my life. Maybe it's the idea of growing, like I do believe God's like a guide, you know what I mean? I don't believe it's like a superhero. I wish I did believe that, because I see people that believe that there's a comfort to it. I just happen not to believe it. But I would love to, actually. Because again, when I've met very, very religious people, I see, wow, they've got a strength, and I just don't believe all of it. So I don't know. It's like to believe in God, but not feel a complete strength, even though looking back, there's been so many miracles.
So would you say that you're co-creating with God, or are you waiting for God to do it, or are you pushing God aside and you're doing it?
Well, I want God to do it for me, but then I feel like God's not. So then I'm like, okay, move over, everyone. Like, I got to just plow ahead. And then it's just me plowing ahead. Or maybe it's my view, or I believe like I should sit back and like ding, ding, ding. And occasionally that happens, but only very occasionally, and so
I think
yeah.
when I talk to people and they express what you're expressing, it sounds like there's a disconnect. So what I tend to tell people is, if you're feeling disconnected, you need to be more of a co-creator, because some people aren't ready to let it all go to a higher power. But would you be willing to co-create together?
But then is it God? If I'm just the co-creator, it's like a partner in a firm or something. It's like, which then is that even God, or just,
Well, what else would it be?
yeah.
Or maybe that's an area that you need to look at. Do I believe that God is on a throne and is an authority and rules over people, and that old brimstone kind of belief? Maybe that's what you're getting caught up in.
Yeah, I don't
Those
believe
stories.
that. I never really believed that it wasn't part of my religion, but like, I guess maybe when we're talking about it, it's like I kind of want to sit back and have someone do it, God do it for me. And then when not, I plow ahead. So it's not like, yeah, I guess I see what you're saying, maybe co-creating.
Because
Yeah.
God can never do for you. You have free will. You're born with free will. We all are. God only interacts with consent. So if you're not consenting and you're not saying, yeah, this is what I want and this is what I want to have be on top of my life and do all that, it's not going to. But some people can't get there right away. So that's when I say, then try working with God instead of for God. And do some co-creating where you're working together. You're consciously making an effort that you're going to do the footwork, and the end result is in God's hands. It's not in your hands, because we can't do end results, but we can get all the way up to the summit. But God puts the icing on it. It's just the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
And I say end result, and I don't mean your end result. I mean the end result. Might not be the way you want it to go, but you don't get to see the great big picture that goes on in the universe. So you have to be willing to co-create and take whatever result comes with your co-creating, and know on some level that was exactly the end result you needed. Even though you might not agree with it, you know that because you were co-creating, it was the right end result.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions, concerns?
There was someone else's hand up.
Yeah, it was me. I'm trying to, I'm sorry that a work call was coming in. Let me get on camera. It's Andrea. I just wanted to, trying to figure out how to word this. So I really appreciate what was said about that we already could have a conscious contact with God, especially being in the program a while and returning to my faith a little bit. But I think what I struggle with is there are people, it's like, it's like making a human a higher power and doing it, not saying consciously they're going to be my higher power, but like having interactions with a human who is assigned to be my spiritual advisor, sponsor. And there are a lot of people I know that have a lot of peace in their heart. They have a good conscious contact with their higher power from taking their sponsor's direction. I have struggled the past few years with humans, I want to say opinion or direction of what's going on in my life. Like I'm almost at this point where it's evolved to they have to share from the first person. Otherwise, I don't even believe them. Unless it's like a class like this where I know you've had, you know what I mean? It's like, unless I'm really vibing with it. But like, I am struggling with that because if a human is not supposed to be my higher power, then why is it working for so many others to like do whatever their sponsor says? Because there are groups that do that and it works for a lot of people. So that's where I'm struggling, you know. And I know when you said coexist, it's like, oh well, maybe God, I always pray, God, please speak through Karin. Like, please, like, somehow she was put in my life. So let me, maybe you're channeling, maybe she's channeling you, but some of it just feels a little iffy. So that's where I'm struggling, you know, is like, I don't know if it's a codependency thing or what.
Well, there is no other authority over you other than what your higher power is. So if somebody's stepping into that position of authority, and you're uncomfortable with it for whatever reason, then you have to look at that and maybe have some prayer around it and decide, is this what's best for me? And you could do some prayer and potentially get, if you were doing some contemplation, you might get an answer that comes up. Maybe, sometimes we think we know what the lesson is, but maybe the lesson is, oh, I have this person in my life because I have to learn how to be more discerning about people in my life that are in an authority position. So we go into it saying, okay, here's my sponsor. I think they're sponsoring me, and that's what they're doing, but I'm feeling like it's something else. And I have to look at that because it's not what I want it to be. And it's not a right or wrong. It's this is not what feels good. This doesn't feel right to me. I don't like how this is working out. And then you take that information and you build more on that. And through all of that, you are co-creating because you're talking or keeping in touch with whatever your higher power is and saying, I need to be discerning about this, and I can't see it on my own, and I need your presence to show me something. And then we become more aware for the rest of the time being, with saying, okay, what can I tap into that's showing me a way that isn't what I've got? Because if you're having doubt, it's probably not an optimum situation. When things are right and things work, it's called the flow. And it just flows. The energy flows and the lessons flow and the sponsoring flows. You can feel it happening. Some people even call God the flow. You can physically almost feel it happening. You just know everything's the way it's supposed to be. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just means it's the way it's supposed to be, and you feel content. your hair on the back of your neck's not going up saying something doesn't feel right about this, or I'm not agreeing with how this person's relationship is working with me. It's too over the top, or it's too invasive, or whatever it is. But you got to pull that stuff out of yourself and put it out on the table and take a look at it and say, where is this taking me? This doesn't feel nice. It doesn't feel right. And it's a relationship that should feel right, but should's kind of a waste of time. Should feel right, but in fact it doesn't. I'm struggling. And if I'm struggling, I have to stop and look. I have to stop and contemplate. I have to get in touch with my higher power and say, show me the way. This isn't working. And sometimes I'll walk in a room and I'll see a book I haven't seen in 5 years, and I'll open the book and I can tell you I've gotten answers that way. Because when I make the intention that I want to be in complete co-creation with my creator, the possibilities are endless. It's everywhere, because to me, God is everything. So God can be a note that comes across my desk that was supposed to be something else, but it's spot on for what I need. So just be open and willing within yourself, with your higher power, to explore what's going on in your life and make sure that it doesn't feel icky or wrong, or there's a flag. You've got a flag. You've got to look at the flag. 100%. And it might be right for someone else, but it's not right for you. I've seen people have the best boss in the world in a huge corporation, and there's 1 or 2 people that just can't get along with that boss. It's just different for everybody. So yeah, perfect bosses are great, but not for the guy who doesn't like that boss. So you find your place where you fit in, where it works for you. If you're working with a sponsor, they're supposed to be working for you, not the other way around. They're your support. And if you're not feeling supported, or you're feeling like something's missing, you need to take inventory on that. Absolutely. All right. If everyone else is good, like I said, if you want to watch the video, there'll be that extra few insightful pictures in there with the brain hijacking, because I just think it's so important to understand our brains being hijacked when we're in our addictions, even when we think it's a great addiction, like crocheting, and I crochet too much and I get crazy. So when you realize the hijacking of your brain is going on, your addiction takes on a whole new meaning, and the world takes on a whole new meaning. And the people that you encounter that are using whatever they're using, you see them differently. They are being hijacked. They're being held at gunpoint in their misery. So if you have the time, go ahead and take a look and watch that. And if you have any comments or questions, I'd love to hear from you guys. So if everybody would like to join me in the serenity prayer. God, please give us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so this is the extra few PowerPoint pictures and information regarding the brain being hijacked, which I felt it was worth saying some more about, because the hijacking of the brain is really key to understanding the disease of addiction, but also removing the moral issue that a lot of people still get caught up on, even within themselves, not just in perhaps judging other people. And it's really difficult. We can get really discouraged by the slow progress and the uncomfortable trade-offs that recovery requires. But take heart in the fact that the commitments and practices of your recovery journey are literally rebuilding the way that your brain works. In an excerpt from a book, it's called A Gentle Path Through the 12 Principles, Living the Values Behind the Steps, Dr. Patrick Carnes outlines current brain science behind addiction and healing and invites us to embrace recovery as a lifelong creative, emotional, physical, and spiritual process of healing and growth. Lifelong. In the 21st century, we know something that Bill W., Dr. Bob, and the other founders of AA intuited but couldn't quite prove scientifically. We now know how and why recovery works. What the founders of AA discovered through trial, error, luck, and grace has now been validated by science. Recent developments in neuroscience, radiology, genetics, and psychobiology give us a clear picture of how addiction hijacks the human brain. They also give us equally clear evidence that working a 12-step program literally rewires our brains for our recovery. Fascinating. But addiction does change the brain, deadening certain cognitive areas and laying down neural networks that chemically encourage us to compulsively repeat our harmful bad behaviors. Encourage us. All addictions, including those that do not involve alcohol or other drugs, create similar wounds in the same centers of our brain. Trauma, whether physical, sexual, or emotional, changes the brain's chemistry, predisposing it to addictions and compulsions. The new thoughts and behaviors produced by working the 12 steps appeal to heal the brain in observable, predictable ways, building and deepening new neural pathways. As these neural pathways deepen, we create new healthy patterns of thinking and acting. No matter how addicted we are or how unmanageable our life has become, our brains retain the potential for healing and recovery in their very cells. Safety is a prerequisite for healing the brain. Only when the brain feels safe, when it isn't functioning in a crisis mode, can it optimally reconstruct itself. Again, amazing. These breakthroughs paint a vivid picture of what happens in recovery. Combined, they verify the original insights of the AA founders in 1939. They also explain why people who leave 12-step programs and don't find similar guidelines for changing their thinking and behaviors usually fall back into addiction. Let's look at some of the many ways in which the brain's chemistry and biology affect our recovery. So, the hijacked brain. Addiction hijacks our brain. Over time, it damages the brain so that it consistently makes harmful choices, even when we don't want it to. Think back to the days before your recovery began. You would plan and intend to do one thing, sometimes with great resolve. Yet, despite your best efforts and intentions, you would nevertheless do something different and harmful. Brain scans have revealed the neurochemistry behind this. All addictions partially damage or disrupt the frontal lobes, the parts of the brain responsible for judgment, discernment, and common sense. This disruption is biological. It has nothing to do with a lack of will or poor moral judgment. These biological changes require significant biological healing. This healing takes time and closely parallels the healing of a stroke victim's brain. As neuroscientist Brian Kolb explains, people with addictions or strokes can't just sit back and wait for the brain to heal itself. Deliberate, ongoing effort is essential. As Dr. Kolb puts it, grab the frontal lobes and don't let go. The 12 principles are vitally important in recovery because they help us focus ongoing energy and attention on healing. They also give us a recipe for sticking with recovery over the long term. In addition, they provide a framework for living a sane and serene life. This framework is built on universal psychological and spiritual principles that work for everyone, not just people in recovery. Working the 12 steps can take us to a place of safety, sanity, and serenity. But the 12 steps are the beginning of a journey, not a destination. Over time, as our recovery deepens, we need to internalize and practice the principles that are suggested by the steps even more in our affairs. Principles require a higher level of thinking and learning than any rule because a principle requires both reflection and mindful implementation. As a result, principles use far more of our bandwidth in our brains and more oxygen and energy as well. It takes almost no thought or energy to follow a sign's instructions to keep off the grass, but it takes discernment, humility, focus, and self awareness to practice courage. The 12 steps also help us integrate the many different areas of the brain. This is an observable biological process, not a metaphor. Full integration requires hours of focused effort, working the steps and practicing the principles. And this is really only laying the foundation for what is a lifelong process and journey. To the brain, recovery is very similar to learning a new language. At first, we focus on learning the basics: vocabulary, pronunciation, placement of nouns and verbs, and learning a language correspond to becoming aware of all the ways our thinking gets hijacked, how our addiction harms other people, and so on. Over time, however, as our fluency builds, we begin to naturally do the next right thing. Picking the correct word or putting our sentences in the proper order corresponds to being honest with ourselves and others, recognizing and acknowledging our feelings, empathizing with and accepting other people, and so on. Eventually, the new language, or for those of us in recovery, the thoughts and behaviors engineered by the 12 steps become fully integrated into our neural wiring. This wiring is not just in one part of our brain. Until recently, scientists thought that the part of the brain known as the hippocampus was the seat of all of our emotions. Brain scans have revealed, however, that we all have very long chains of brain cells that appear to weave back and forth around the hemispheres of our brain, starting on one side of our head and ending up on the other. These carry information and the capacity to experience emotion all over the brain. It turns out that our emotions aren't localized in any one part of the brain. They're built into our brain's organizational structure. Our emotions also may partly reside in other parts of our body. It now appears that every human heart has cells that are involved with our experience of certain emotions. We often say that we know something in our hearts. It turns out that this might be literally true. Freeing up your brain's bandwidth, one of the simplest but most powerful results of living by the 12 principles is freedom. Addicts' lives are full of inconsistencies. We say one thing but do another. We live secret lives. We lie. We do things that are inconsistent with how we present ourselves to the world. We have so many things to keep track of: multiple stories, lies, promises, and lives. The 12 principles are all about consistency. When we practice these principles in all our affairs, what we believe, what we say, and what we do all match up. As a result, we no longer have to keep track of anything but reality. This frees up a great deal of our emotional and intellectual bandwidth for engaging fully with life and for doing the next right thing. The author of this book, Patrick J. Carnes, is an internationally known authority on addiction and recovery issues. He has authored over 20 books, including the best-selling titles Out of the Shadows, Understanding Addiction Recovery, Betrayal Bond, Don't Call It Love, and A Gentle Path Through the 12 Steps. Make a list of these 12 principles and maybe practice one each month. After a year, you will be a completely different person. Thank you for watching.